The massive crystal walls of the Galactic Council's entertainment complex stretched high above the gathered representatives, each surface displaying holographic feeds from battles across a dozen worlds. General Zexithera of the Kelvani Empire stood with forearms crossed behind their elongated back, watching the latest war game with growing boredom. The Ylthari fleet engaged the Corvan defenders in what their species called honorable combat, but what Zexithera recognized as a carefully choreographed dance where both sides knew exactly how many ships they would lose. Before anyone fired a shot, Ambassador, Krivak slithered up beside the general, his serpentine body coiling in the gesture his people used for casual greeting. His scales shifted from deep blue to pale green, indicating mild excitement. Krivak served as the head of the Entertainment Committee, a position that made him wealthy beyond measure as billions of beings across the galaxy paid premium rates to watch civilized warfare from the comfort of their homes. The committee had spent decades perfecting the formula for galactic entertainment. Enough danger to create tension, enough safety protocols to prevent real tragedy, and enough variety to keep audiences engaged. The current battle followed the standard pattern. Energy shields flickered as plasma bolts struck them, creating spectacular light shows that looked impressive to viewers, but rarely caused permanent damage. When ships were destroyed in these engagements, their crews were safely transported away before impact, their vessels replaced by holographic explosions that satisfied audience bloodlust without actual bloodshed. It was war as entertainment, conflict without consequence, and Zexithera found it increasingly tedious. Krivak's voice carried the musical quality of his species when he spoke. The audience grows restless, General. Ratings have dropped 17% over the last cycle. They want something new, something unexpected. The Corvan-Ylthari engagement was supposed to provide drama, but both sides are following their military academy's teachings too precisely. Everyone knows the Corvans will retreat after losing exactly 12 ships, and the Ylthari will pursue for exactly 47 minutes before declaring victory and withdrawing to tend their wounded. The whole battle will last 3 hours and 14 minutes, just like their last engagement. Zexithera's secondary eyes focused on a display showing audience engagement statistics, while their primary eyes remained fixed on the battle. The numbers confirmed Krivak's concerns. Viewership was declining across all major species, and even the gambling houses were reporting reduced betting activity. When warfare became predictable, it ceased to be entertaining. The general had spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of controlled conflict, balancing spectacle with safety, but perfection bred boredom. The ambassador's scales shifted to excited yellow as he produced a small data crystal from one of his carrying pouches. General, I may have found our solution. Our exploration teams have cataloged a new species on the outer rim. They call themselves humans, and they inhabit a world designated as Sol 3. Initial scans suggest they possess technology roughly equivalent to Level 2 civilizations, with projectile weapons, chemical propulsion, and primitive computing systems. They appear perfect for our needs. Advanced enough to provide interesting tactics, but primitive enough to create genuine uncertainty in our competitions. Zexithera accepted the crystal and inserted it into their personal data reader. Images of the human homeworld appeared before them. A blue and green sphere with active weather systems, diverse terrain, and what appeared to be a single sapient species spread across multiple continents. The preliminary survey data showed humans used metal projectiles instead of energy weapons, burned chemical fuels for transportation, and relied on verbal communication rather than telepathic networks. Their technology level suggested they had recently achieved basic spaceflight, but lacked faster-than-light travel or defensive shield systems. The data included population estimates, industrial capacity assessments, and military organization charts. Humans appeared to divide themselves into separate political entities called nations, each maintaining independent military forces. This struck Zexithera as inefficient but potentially entertaining, as it suggested humans might fight among themselves for the amusement of galactic audiences. Their weapons were crude but showed interesting variety. Explosive devices, chemical propellants, and what appeared to be biological warfare capabilities, though the latter seemed restricted by their own cultural taboos. Krivak's enthusiasm was evident in his rapidly shifting scale patterns. They have no energy shields, General, no plasma weapons, no gravitational manipulation technology, but they show remarkable creativity in their primitive warfare. Look at these historical records. They have engaged in continuous conflicts throughout their recorded history, developing increasingly sophisticated methods of destruction within their technological limitations. They even fought wars using animals as weapons and learned to harness explosive chemicals found naturally on their world. The general reviewed combat footage extracted from human communication networks. The images showed conflicts unlike anything in galactic civilization. Humans fought in environments that would challenge most species: frozen wastelands, burning deserts, dense jungles, and urban areas filled with their own civilians. They used terrain as a tactical advantage, employed camouflage techniques, and showed a disturbing willingness to engage in close-quarters combat using handheld weapons. Most civilized species considered physical proximity during warfare to be barbaric, but humans seemed to prefer it. What impressed Zexathara most was human adaptability. Their military units operated effectively in any environment their world provided, from underwater to high altitude, from Arctic cold to desert heat. They had developed specialized equipment for each environment and trained their soldiers to function in conditions that would incapacitate most galactic species. This suggested they might provide the unpredictability that current war games lacked. The entertainment value seemed obvious. Humans were primitive enough that their eventual defeat was certain, but advanced enough to potentially provide interesting resistance before being eliminated. Their crude weapons would be amusing to galactic audiences accustomed to elegant energy-based combat systems. Their lack of shields meant that every hit would count, creating genuine tension rather than the drawn-out shield exchanges that characterized most galactic warfare. They could serve as opening entertainment before the main events featuring more advanced species. Krivak coiled his body in the gesture of agreement. "I propose we extend an invitation to these humans, General. We can present it as an honor, a chance to join the galactic community through participation in our war games. Their primitive technology means they cannot pose any real threat to established powers, but their unpredictability might provide exactly the entertainment value our audiences crave. If they prove insufficiently challenging, we can always arrange for them to face overwhelming odds in later rounds." The general found the proposal reasonable. Introducing a genuinely primitive species would certainly generate interest among galactic audiences who had grown tired of predictable conflicts between civilized powers. Humans appeared to be perfect candidates, advanced enough to understand the basic concepts of organized warfare, but primitive enough to be easily controlled and ultimately defeated for audience satisfaction. Their apparent enthusiasm for conflict suggested they might even volunteer willingly for what they would perceive as an honor. Zexathara made the decision with the casual indifference of someone arranging entertainment for children. "Very well, Ambassador. Send the invitation through standard diplomatic channels. Offer them the usual incentives: technology sharing, galactic citizenship, and participation in the broader community. Present their involvement in our war games as an opportunity to prove their worth as a species. Given their apparent fondness for conflict, they will likely accept eagerly. We can schedule their first engagement for the next major entertainment cycle." As Krivak departed to prepare the invitation, Zexathara returned their attention to the current battle, where the Yelthari had just achieved their predetermined victory exactly on schedule. The general felt satisfied with the decision to invite humans into galactic warfare. What could possibly go wrong with introducing such a primitive species into their carefully controlled entertainment system? After all, they were just another Level 2 civilization with crude weapons and no understanding of real galactic power. The humans would provide a brief diversion before inevitably succumbing to superior technology and tactics, giving audiences the novelty they craved while maintaining the safety and predictability that made galactic warfare profitable. It seemed like a perfect solution to their entertainment crisis. 3 weeks after the galactic invitation arrived on Earth, Colonel Jake Morrison stood in the loading bay of the massive alien transport ship, watching his soldiers prepare their equipment for inspection. The men and women under his command moved with practiced efficiency, born from years of combat experience across Earth's many conflict zones. They checked their weapons with the same careful attention they had shown in Afghanistan, Iraq, and a dozen other places where human beings had learned to kill each other with increasing effectiveness. Sergeant Alex Murphy supervised the weapons layout while Captain Nina Rodriguez organized the medical supplies. Private Danny Cooper sat cross-legged on the deck, carefully cleaning his rifle with the same devotion other species might reserve for religious ceremonies. The humans had brought what their military considered standard equipment: assault rifles, grenades, body armor, night vision goggles, medical kits, and what the aliens would soon discover was an impressive collection of improvised weapons, disguised as camping gear. General Zexothera approached the human area with scientific curiosity, rather than military concern. The general had observed hundreds of species preparing for war games over the centuries, and each followed predictable patterns. Advanced civilizations arrived with energy weapons, shield generators, and gravity manipulation devices. Primitive species brought crude projectile weapons and chemical explosives. The humans fell clearly into the latter category, their equipment appearing almost antique by galactic standards. What puzzled Zexothara was the variety of non-combat items the humans had packed. Alongside their weapons lay water purification tablets, emergency medical supplies, portable cooking equipment, and what appeared to be recreational items including books, music players, and games. Most species brought only military equipment to war games, relying on provided facilities for everything else. The humans seemed to have prepared for an extended camping trip rather than a brief military exercise. Colonel Morrison noticed the alien general's attention and approached with Dr. Lisa Chen, Earth's xenobiologist and cultural liaison. Morrison moved with the confident bearing of someone who had commanded troops in combat, while Chen carried herself with the careful precision of a scientist entering an unprecedented situation. Both humans appeared remarkably calm considering they were surrounded by technology that exceeded their civilization's capabilities by several centuries. Dr. Chen served as translator during the initial briefing. Her understanding of galactic languages impressive for someone from such a primitive world. General Zexothera explained the wargame format with the patience of an adult, describing a simple game to children. The scenarios would test various military capabilities: planetary assault, defensive operations, resource control, and technological adaptation. Each battle would last several days, with full medical support and safety protocols ensuring minimal casualties. Colonel Morrison asked questions that revealed the cultural gap between human and galactic warfare. He wanted to know about civilian populations, prisoner treatment, and rules of engagement regarding non-combatants. These concerns seemed strange to Zexothera, as war games took place on uninhabited worlds with clearly defined military targets. The idea that warfare might involve non-military personnel was a concept most galactic civilizations had abandoned centuries ago when they learned to conduct conflicts in controlled environments. The first scenario was designed as a gentle introduction to galactic warfare standards. The humans would face the Vulcan Confederacy in a simple planetary assault exercise on a barren world designated Combat Zone Theta 7. The Vulcans were known throughout the galaxy for their adherence to traditional military doctrine, making them ideal opponents for inexperienced species. They followed established battle patterns with disciplined precision, creating predictable engagements that allowed new participants to learn galactic warfare conventions without significant risk. General Zexothera expected the engagement to last approximately 6 hours with human forces, eliminated through conventional tactics within the first 2 hours. The Vulcans would demonstrate superior firepower and defensive capabilities while maintaining enough restraint to avoid actual casualties. The humans would provide brief entertainment value through their primitive tactics before succumbing to obviously superior technology, giving galactic audiences a satisfying confirmation of technological progression while introducing a new species to the entertainment roster. When the transport ships reached Combat Zone Theta 7, the humans gathered their equipment with calm efficiency that impressed the alien observers. Captain Rodriguez distributed ammunition, while Sergeant Murphy reviewed tactical maps with his squad leaders. Private Cooper helped load medical supplies with the same careful attention he gave to his weapons maintenance. The humans showed none of the nervous excitement or fearful anticipation that characterized most species entering their first galactic combat. Scenario: the planet's surface resembled a harsh desert landscape with rocky outcroppings, scattered vegetation, and extreme temperature variations between day and night. Most galactic species would consider such an environment challenging and seek to minimize exposure through rapid tactical strikes and heavy reliance on environmental control systems. The humans examined the terrain with obvious interest, discussing wind patterns, concealment opportunities, and resource availability as if they were planning an extended vacation rather than preparing for combat. As the battle commenced, galactic audiences settled in for what they expected to be a brief demonstration of human inadequacy, followed by Vulcan tactical superiority. The Vulcans established their standard defensive perimeter using energy shields and automated weapon systems, creating an impressive display of coordinated firepower that had overwhelmed dozens of primitive species in previous engagements. Their formation followed military academy protocols precisely, creating overlapping fields of fire and mutually supporting defensive positions. Then something unexpected happened that would fundamentally change galactic entertainment forever. Instead of mounting a direct assault against superior firepower as every other primitive species had attempted, the humans simply disappeared. One moment they were visible on battlefield sensors advancing toward Vulcan positions, and the next moment they had vanished into the landscape as completely as if they had never existed. The Vulcans maintained their defensive formation, waiting for an attack that never came from the direction they expected. General Zexathara watched the battlefield displays with growing confusion as hours passed without contact between the opposing forces. The Vulcans held their positions according to doctrine, while their sensors failed to locate the human forces. This had never happened before in galactic war games, where primitive species typically attacked immediately and were defeated within standard time frames. The humans appeared to have adopted some form of passive resistance that made no tactical sense according to established military theory. The first indication that something was seriously wrong came when Vulcan supply convoys began reporting equipment failures and communication disruptions. Transport vehicles broke down in areas where no enemy contact had been reported. Supply caches disappeared without triggering security alarms. Patrol units returned with stories of finding their equipment sabotaged in ways that bypassed all known detection systems. The humans were somehow striking at Vulcan logistics without engaging in direct combat, a strategy that violated every principle of honorable warfare. Private Cooper demonstrated the effectiveness of improvised explosive devices, constructed from materials the Vulcans had dismissed as harmless camping supplies. Captain Rodriguez employed psychological warfare tactics that left Vulcan soldiers jumping at shadows and reporting phantom contacts that investigation proved to be empty terrain. Sergeant Murphy's squads moved through the landscape using skills learned in Earth's diverse and hostile environments, treating the alien world as just another deployment zone where adaptation meant survival. Most disturbing to galactic observers was the humans' apparent indifference to environmental hardships that would have forced other species to seek shelter or medical attention. They operated effectively in temperature extremes, showed no adverse effects from the planet's thin atmosphere, and seemed to thrive in conditions that the Vulcans found barely tolerable, even with environmental suits. When Vulcan soldiers were wounded by improvised weapons, they required extended medical treatment. But humans who suffered similar injuries returned to combat within hours, using primitive medical techniques that somehow proved more effective than advanced galactic healing technology. By the end of the first day, the Vulcans had lost control of half their supply network without ever seeing their opponents clearly enough to return effective fire. Their defensive positions remained intact, but they were slowly being starved of resources and demoralized by an enemy that refused to fight according to established rules. General Zexathara found themselves watching something that had never occurred in centuries of galactic warfare. A primitive species was defeating an advanced civilization through tactics that no military academy had ever considered teaching because they were too brutal, too underhanded, and too effective for civilized warfare. General Zexathara stood before the massive display screens in the command center, watching human forces achieve their third consecutive victory against species that should have overwhelmed them within hours. The latest engagement had been against the Corvani Defense Corps, renowned throughout the galaxy for their advanced shield technology and disciplined formations. The humans had defeated them in 2 days using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare, leaving Corvani commanders filing formal complaints about unsporting conduct and requesting rule clarifications. What disturbed the general most was not the human victories. themselves, but the casual way, Colonel. Morrison and Dr. Chen discussed them afterward. They showed no excitement about defeating superior technology, no surprise at their success, and no awareness that they had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic warfare history. When asked about their tactics, Morrison explained them with the same matter-of-fact tone he might use to describe breakfast preparations, as if guerrilla warfare and psychological operations were natural responses to any military situation. Dr. Chen had offered to serve as a cultural guide for anyone interested in understanding human society, an offer Zexathara now accepted with growing unease. The xenobiologist seemed genuinely pleased to share information about her homeworld, apparently unaware that each revelation made her species appear more terrifying to galactic sensibilities. She spoke about Earth with obvious affection, describing it as a beautiful world full of diverse life and natural wonders, not recognizing that her casual descriptions painted a picture of a death world that would give most civilized beings nightmares. The tour began in Dr. Chen's temporary quarters, where she had created a small display of items from Earth intended to make alien visitors feel welcome. Zexathara examined what Chen called coffee, a dark liquid that humans consumed daily for stimulation. Chemical analysis revealed it contained enough caffeine to poison most galactic species, yet humans not only tolerated it, but seemed to require it for normal functioning. Chen offered the general a cup with cheerful hospitality, apparently not realizing she was suggesting the consumption of what amounted to a toxic waste product. Dr. Chen showed holographic images of Earth's landscapes with obvious pride in her planet's beauty. She pointed out massive storm systems that she called hurricanes, describing them as natural weather phenomena that occurred regularly in certain regions. To Zexathara's horror, she explained that humans had learned to predict these storms and simply evacuated temporarily, before returning to rebuild in the same locations. The idea of voluntarily living in areas subject to regular natural disasters was beyond galactic comprehension, yet humans seemed to consider it normal residential planning. The xenobiologist displayed recordings of Earth's diverse wildlife, with the enthusiasm of someone sharing vacation photos. She showed massive predators called tigers and lions that humans had once hunted with primitive weapons, apparently for recreational purposes. Sharks that could kill humans in seconds were described as magnificent creatures that humans swam with voluntarily. Venomous snakes, poisonous spiders, and aggressive bears were presented as natural parts of Earth's ecosystem that humans had learned to coexist with through what Chen called common sense precautions. Zexathara began to understand why human soldiers showed no fear of alien environments. Earth's gravity was higher than galactic standard, meaning humans were naturally stronger than most species. Earth's atmosphere contained 21% oxygen, a highly reactive gas that would be considered dangerously volatile on most worlds. Earth's temperature ranges varied from freezing to desert heat, and humans had adapted to function in all of them. What other species would consider extreme environmental hazards, humans apparently viewed as minor variations in normal living conditions. Dr. Chen proudly explained that humans had spread to every continent on their world, adapting to environments from Arctic ice to tropical jungles. She showed images of human settlements in deserts where water was scarce, on mountains where the air was thin, and in regions subject to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Other galactic species chose their homeworld locations based on optimal conditions and avoided areas with environmental challenges. Humans seem to interpret challenging environments as opportunities to prove their adaptability, rather than places to avoid. The true horror became apparent when Chen began discussing human history with obvious pride in her species' achievements. She described how humans had domesticated wolves, turning apex predators into loyal companions through selective breeding over thousands of years. She explained how early humans had hunted mammoths and other megafauna to extinction, using nothing more than sharpened sticks and coordinated group tactics. Every story of human progress involved defeating, controlling, or eliminating something that should have been far more dangerous than a relatively small primate species. General Zexathara realized that on Earth, humans were not simply another intelligent species that had achieved dominance through tool use and cooperation. They were apex predators who had systematically eliminated or absorbed every form of competition their world had produced. Earth's fossil record showed mass extinctions that coincided with human expansion, suggesting that wherever humans went, everything else either adapted to serve human purposes or disappeared entirely. This was not the pattern of a civilized species learning to coexist with their environment, but of a predator species reshaping their entire world to suit their needs. The implications for galactic civilization were staggering. Every other spacefaring species had achieved interstellar travel through cooperation, resource sharing, and peaceful development of technology. Humans had reached space through competition between rival nations, each seeking military advantage over the others. Their greatest technological achievements had military origins. Rocket technology developed from weapon systems, satellite networks created for military communication, and computer technology advanced through warfare applications. Human progress was driven by conflict rather than cooperation. Dr. Chen mentioned that humans had developed nuclear weapons shortly after discovering atomic energy, treating the power to destroy their entire civilization as a natural extension of scientific progress. She explained this with the same casual tone she used to discuss weather patterns, apparently not realizing that most species required centuries of ethical development before being trusted with planet-destroying technology. Humans had created such weapons within decades of splitting the atom, and had pointed them at each other. In what they called deterrence strategy, Zexthera began to understand why human military tactics seemed so brutal by galactic standards. They were not fighting for entertainment, glory, or political advantage as civilized species did in war games. They were fighting with the instincts and capabilities of a species that had survived by being more dangerous than everything else, on a world that was actively trying to kill them. Their casual acceptance of environmental hazards, their adaptation to impossible conditions, and their ability to turn any situation into a tactical advantage suddenly made terrifying sense. The general watched Dr. Chen pack away her cultural display items with growing horror at what the Galactic Council had done. They had invited apex predators from a death world to participate in entertainment designed for civilized species. They had assumed that primitive technology meant primitive capabilities, not recognizing that humans had developed those primitive technologies specifically for killing things that were bigger, stronger, and more naturally dangerous than they were. The galaxy's entertainment industry had inadvertently unleashed something that had no equivalent in civilized space. As Chen departed with cheerful thanks for the general's interest in human culture, Zexthera stood alone contemplating the magnitude of the mistake the galaxy had made. The humans were not primitive by choice or lack of development, but by necessity imposed by their environment. They had learned to thrive without advanced technology, because their world demanded constant adaptation and innovation for survival. Now they had been given access to galactic technology, while retaining all the survival instincts of an apex predator species, creating something that galactic civilization was completely unprepared to handle. The entertainment complex's main viewing hall had never been so quiet during an active war game. Ambassador Krivak watched the ratings displays with growing alarm as viewership numbers dropped for the third consecutive day. What had started as the most anticipated entertainment event of the cycle was becoming something that galactic audiences found deeply disturbing rather than amusing. The humans had won 7 straight engagements, and each victory had been more unsettling than the last. The latest battle had pitted human forces against the Arcturian Heavy Brigade, considered one of the most formidable military units in galactic space. The Arcturians possessed advanced power armor, plasma artillery, and tactical shields that had never failed against primitive weapons. They had entered the engagement with supreme confidence, treating the humans as a minor training exercise before the real competition began. Within 18 hours, the entire brigade had surrendered, after their commanding officers suffered what their medical staff described as complete psychological breakdown. Colonel Morrison found himself in an increasingly awkward position as the designated representative of a species the galaxy was learning to fear. During post-battle briefings, other military commanders avoided making direct eye contact with him, a behavior Dr. Chen had explained was typical when prey animals encountered natural predators. Morrison tried to downplay human capabilities, but every attempt to appear less threatening only highlighted how dangerous his species truly was. Their restraint was being interpreted as predatory patience rather than peaceful intention. Dr. Chen continued her cultural exchange activities with innocent enthusiasm, apparently unaware that each revelation about human society sent waves of terror through the galactic diplomatic community. She had recently given a presentation about human medical capabilities that left alien doctors questioning everything they understood about biological limitations. Humans routinely survived injuries that would kill most species, recovered from diseases that had no known cure, and seemed to develop immunity to biological threats through simple exposure rather than requiring sophisticated treatments. The medical demonstration had been particularly disturbing when Private Danny Cooper volunteered to show how humans treated combat injuries in field conditions. Using supplies from a basic first aid kit, he demonstrated wound cleaning, suturing, and pain management techniques that alien medics found primitively brutal, yet surprisingly effective. When asked about anesthetics, Cooper explained that humans could function through pain levels that would incapacitate most species, treating severe discomfort as a minor inconvenience rather than a medical emergency requiring immediate intervention. Captain Nina Rodriguez had unknowingly caused a diplomatic incident during a casual conversation about human recreational activities. She mentioned that humans engaged in activities called extreme sports for entertainment, describing mountain climbing, deep-sea diving, and parachuting as enjoyable pastimes rather than survival training. When alien observers realized that humans voluntarily exposed themselves to potentially fatal situations for fun, several species filed formal requests for increased security protocols during any interaction with human personnel. Sergeant Alex Murphy's squad had demonstrated improvised weapon construction, using materials available in any standard galactic facility, turning maintenance supplies into effective combat tools within minutes. When questioned about these skills, Murphy explained that human military training emphasized adaptability and resource utilization under adverse conditions. He seemed genuinely surprised that other species required specialized equipment for every tactical situation, as if the ability to weaponize ordinary objects was a basic survival skill rather than advanced military capability. General Zexthara faced a crisis of conscience as reports accumulated from various departments throughout the entertainment complex. Security personnel requested guidance on handling a species that could apparently kill with their bare hands and turn any environment into a tactical advantage. Medical staff filed concerns about treating beings whose baseline physical capabilities exceeded their understanding of biological limits. Even the food service department reported problems after discovering that humans could digest substances that were toxic to most galactic species. The turning point came when Ambassador Krivak suggested increasing entertainment value by removing combat restrictions and allowing unlimited warfare scenarios. The idea was to create more exciting content by permitting the use of advanced weapons, chemical agents, and biological warfare techniques that were normally prohibited in civilized conflicts. Krivak believed that escalated combat would restore audience interest while giving alien forces the overwhelming advantages needed to finally defeat the troublesome humans. General Zexthara attended the planning meeting with growing horror as Krivak outlined his proposal for unrestricted warfare. The ambassador spoke enthusiastically about removing limitations on weapons of mass destruction, environmental warfare, and psychological operations, apparently not realizing that these restrictions had been created specifically to protect civilized species from capabilities they could not handle. Krivak seemed to believe that superior galactic technology would automatically provide victory once artificial limitations were removed. During the meeting, Private Cooper made an offhand comment that revealed the true extent of human restraint during the previous engagements. He mentioned that human forces were operating under strict rules of engagement that prohibited the use of what he casually referred to as really effective stuff because it would violate several galactic treaties regarding chemical and biological weapons. The statement was delivered with the same tone someone might use to discuss weather conditions, but it sent chills through every alien observer present. Captain Rodriguez added that human military doctrine included extensive training in unconventional warfare techniques that were considered too brutal for civilized conflicts. She explained that Earth's military history included the development and deployment of weapons designed specifically to cause maximum psychological trauma rather than clean elimination of enemy forces. The casual way she discussed nerve agents, biological weapons, and systematic terror campaigns made it clear that humans considered such tools to be normal extensions of military capability, rather than unthinkable atrocities. Zexthara realized with mounting terror that the galaxy had been protected not by human inability to access advanced weapons, but by human conscience and their adherence to galactic regulations. The humans possessed knowledge of warfare techniques that could devastate civilized species who had never developed defenses against truly ruthless opponents. Their victories in the war games had been achieved while they were deliberately holding back their most effective capabilities out of respect for galactic sensibilities and legal restrictions. The general understood that removing combat restrictions would not provide the overwhelming alien victory that Krivak expected, but would instead unleash something that galactic civilization was completely unprepared to face. Humans had developed their most sophisticated military techniques through conflicts against other humans, meaning they had spent millennia perfecting methods of warfare against opponents who shared their intelligence, adaptability, and ruthlessness. Applied against species that had achieved peace through cooperation rather than superior killing ability, such techniques would be devastatingly effective, Colonel. Morrison seemed to sense the growing unease in the room and attempted to reassure the alien observers that humans could control their military capabilities according to whatever standards the galactic community preferred. His offer to accept any restrictions or oversight necessary to maintain peaceful relations only emphasized how dangerous his species was by highlighting their voluntary restraint. The implication that humans were consciously choosing not to use their full capabilities made their demonstrated prowess even more frightening to species who had been giving their maximum effort. General Zexthara made the decision that would change galactic entertainment forever. Rather than allowing Krivak to remove combat restrictions and unleash human capabilities that could traumatize civilized species, the general chose to end the war games immediately and reveal the truth about what the galaxy had invited into their entertainment complex. The decision was not based on concerns about human victory or defeat, but on the recognition that some forms of warfare were too dangerous to be treated as entertainment, regardless of who won or lost. The emergency session of the Galactic Council drew representatives from every major civilization in known space, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, colors, and telepathic emanations that filled the massive assembly hall. General Zexithara stood at the central podium facing thousands of beings who had gathered to hear the truth about Earth and its inhabitants. The session was being broadcast live across the galaxy, reaching billions of viewers who had no idea that their understanding of warfare, survival, and the nature of intelligent life was about to change forever. Ambassador Krivak had initially opposed ending the war games, arguing that viewership could be restored through more creative programming and enhanced special effects. His protests had ceased when Zexithara showed him classified reports from the entertainment complex's xenobiology department. The scientists had spent weeks analyzing human capabilities and had concluded that Earth qualified as a Class 12 death world, a classification so extreme that only 3 other planets in galactic records had ever received such a designation, and none of those had produced spacefaring civilizations. General Zexthara began the presentation with geological surveys of Earth, displaying data that caused audible gasps from species whose homeworlds were stable and predictable. Earth's tectonic activity generated earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis on a regular basis. Its weather systems included hurricanes, tornadoes, and blizzards that would qualify as natural disasters on most civilized worlds. Its gravity was 30% higher than galactic standard. Its atmospheric pressure was considered extreme, and its oxygen concentration was high enough to support combustion processes that would be impossible on safer worlds. The biological analysis proved even more disturbing to the assembled representatives. Earth's ecosystem was dominated by predator-prey relationships of extraordinary complexity and violence. The planet harbored venomous creatures whose toxins could kill humans within minutes. Yet humans had learned to extract and use these same toxins for medical purposes. Massive predators that should have eliminated human ancestors had instead been hunted to extinction or domesticated into useful companions. Earth's evolutionary history showed repeated mass extinctions, each followed by explosive diversification that produced increasingly dangerous life forms. Zexithara displayed fossil evidence showing that humans had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and climate changes that would have eliminated most civilized species. Rather than seeking safer environments, humans had adapted to hostile conditions by developing better tools, more sophisticated social structures, and increasingly effective methods of environmental control. Every challenge their world presented had been met not with retreat or accommodation but with technological solutions, designed to master rather than coexist with dangerous natural forces. The presentation shifted to human technological development, revealing a pattern that horrified galactic observers who had achieved progress through peaceful cooperation and resource sharing. Human advancement was driven primarily by military competition between rival groups, each seeking advantages that would allow them to survive conflicts with other humans. Their greatest innovations had emerged from warfare, metallurgy from weapon crafting, chemistry from explosive development, electronics from communication and guidance systems for increasingly sophisticated instruments of destruction. General Zexathera showed recordings of human nuclear weapons testing, explaining that humans had developed planet-destroying capabilities within decades of discovering atomic energy. Unlike other species who required centuries of ethical development before being trusted with such power, humans had immediately weaponized their scientific discoveries and deployed them against each other. They had achieved space travel not through scientific curiosity, but through military competition, racing to establish orbital superiority that would provide tactical advantages in terrestrial conflicts. The most disturbing revelation came when Zexathera explained that humans had achieved planetary peace not through cooperation or shared resources, but through mutual assured destruction. They had created weapons capable of ending their civilization and had pointed them at each other until the cost of conflict exceeded its benefits. Human peace was maintained by the constant threat of total annihilation, a concept so alien to galactic civilization that several species requested translation verification to ensure they had understood correctly. Colonel Morrison and Dr. Chen had been invited to address the assembly, though their presence caused visible anxiety among representatives who now understood what they were facing. Morrison spoke with the calm professionalism of someone accustomed to explaining military concepts to civilian audiences, apparently unaware that his casual discussion of human warfare capabilities was terrorizing some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. He emphasized that humans could be peaceful and cooperative when not threatened, but his assurances only highlighted the conditional nature of human restraint. Dr. Chen attempted to present humanity's positive qualities, describing their creativity, adaptability, and capacity for cooperation when working toward common goals. She showed examples of human art, music, and literature that demonstrated sophisticated emotional and intellectual development. However, her cultural presentation only emphasized how thoroughly humans had integrated violence into every aspect of their civilization. Their greatest artistic achievements included war poetry. Their most celebrated literature featured conflict as a central theme, and their music had evolved from traditional forms designed to coordinate group activities including warfare. General Zexathera proposed a fundamental change in the relationship between Earth and galactic civilization. Rather than treating humans as primitive beings requiring guidance toward civilized behavior, the general suggested that humans should be recognized as survival specialists whose capabilities could benefit every species in the galaxy. The proposal acknowledged that human methods were often brutal by galactic standards, but argued that their effectiveness could not be denied when facing genuine threats to civilized existence. Captain Rodriguez presented a different perspective during her address to the assembly, explaining that humans were not just warriors, but survivors who had learned to thrive in conditions that would challenge any civilization. She described human adaptability as a resource that could help galactic species prepare for threats they had never encountered, because their peaceful development had not required such capabilities. However, she warned that accepting human assistance would require understanding that survival skills, once learned, could not be easily forgotten or abandoned. Sergeant Murphy addressed the practical implications of cooperation between humans and galactic civilization, explaining that human military doctrine emphasized teaching others to defend themselves, rather than creating dependency on professional warriors. He offered to establish training programs where humans would share survival techniques with alien species, while learning galactic technology and cooperation methods in return. The proposal represented a fundamental shift from entertainment-based interaction to mutual benefit through skill sharing. Private. Cooper demonstrated the practical value of human adaptability by solving several technical problems that had challenged galactic engineers for years. Using nothing more than basic materials and human problem-solving approaches, he created functional solutions to complex issues through methods that violated established engineering principles, but achieved desired results. His demonstrations showed that human thinking patterns, developed through constant adaptation to hostile environments, could provide valuable alternatives to conventional galactic approaches to technological challenges. The session concluded with the establishment of joint training, facilities where humans would teach survival skills to volunteers from various galactic species while receiving education in advanced technology and diplomatic cooperation. General Zexithara became the first alien officer to volunteer for complete human military training on Earth, choosing to experience firsthand the crucible that had forged humanity's warrior spirit. The decision represented a fundamental acknowledgement that galactic civilization had something to learn from a species they had initially dismissed as primitive entertainment. The final scene of this transformation showed Private Cooper, now serving as an instructor at the first joint training facility, teaching a mixed class of alien species how to create fire using only natural materials. The simple skill represented something profound about human capabilities: the ability to thrive where others merely survived, to find opportunity in adversity, and to turn any environment into a resource for continued existence. As Cooper patiently guided his alien students through the basic survival technique, word was spreading beyond the galaxy that something new had emerged in civilized space, and ancient threats that had long ignored the peaceful galactic community now hesitated, having heard whispers of the Death World and its apex predators who had conquered a hostile planet and turned their attention to the stars.